Hello, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jo Lichten, a professional speaker who helps people stay healthy, sane, and productive. An important skill right now during these trying times. And so I've started these calls every day at 1 o'clock to share things that you can do during these difficult times. And I wanted to share with you first a picture. Can you see it? It's hard to see, but basically this is something that my daughter sent me this morning. It's a picture of my 2.5-year-old granddaughter. She's clutching her little biggie. And initially I didn't know what it was. And I said, what is she holding? And she said, that's little biggie. And I said, that's little biggie. And well, little biggie is something that I made for my daughter way more than 20 years ago. And it was during a very difficult time in her life. She had been at home with me. I had the privilege of having her home for her first 2.5 years. She did have somebody taking care of her while I was working, but still she was at home with me. And then at 2.5 years, she had to go to a daycare center. And when I dropped her off and gave her her biggie for her, her big biggie, for her nap, the teacher said, oh, we don't allow blankets here. And of course, my daughter went, freaking out. And I said, don't worry, I'll be back in a half hour. And so I went home and took some of that biggie, which is the same material that was in the bumper pad of this set that came when she was born. I cut out a square about this big, put some really soft satiny ribbon around it. And it was this little square that she could roll up and tuck in her pocket. And she called it Little Biggie. And the teacher allowed that. So she had Little Biggie to self-soothe herself during these difficult times. Now, why am I sharing a picture of my granddaughter and talking about self-soothing? Because many of us adults don't know how to self-soothe. We tend to go after nicotine, alcohol, food, those kinds of things to soothe us when we're feeling anxious and worried and concerned, rather than having a more healthy approach to it. So I would invite you all to think about, how do you self-soothe? And want to share with you something that I have on my desk. In fact, Jennifer Neely, or known as Neely, is going to be talking with us on Monday about self-soothing. And we were talking about worry stones, and we both agree we don't like the word worry stone. Why have the word worry in there? And so we're calling it soothing stones. And this is mine. It's a shell that's very worn and broken. And there's just something about it that has just a nice feel to it. When I'm feeling anxious and worried and can't go for a run, and maybe I don't have a dog next to me to pet, I can pull out my soothing stone and kind of calm myself down. I know maybe you think I'm a little too old to need something like this, but trust me, we all need something like this. I wanted to share with you our guest that's coming up real soon. It's Mufasa. Okay, the lion's not going to be here tonight, but anyway, it is the first Canadian-born actor to play Mufasa in the live production of Disney's The Lion King. I know him because he's a professional speaker like myself. He's also a speaking performance coach and a salsa competitive dancer. Wow. He's also the author of a recent book. Let me read what it's called. Speaking Notes, the 8 Essential Elements to Make Your Speech Music to Their Ears. So welcome, John Watkiss. How are you?
I'm great, Dr. Jo, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I understand you're going to share with us lessons in the circle of life from Mufasa.
Thank you. I had the pleasure, and I look back on it now, 20 years ago, to be the first Canadian-born actor to play Mufasa in The Lion King. And there are lessons that come directly from the show itself. But there were also lessons that I learned both on stage and backstage. And I want to share just a couple of those lessons with you. I usually share them in a keynote called Lessons in the Circle of Life. but I picked out three to share with you this afternoon as we talk about mental health and even just physical wellness. The first lesson, and it's interesting because a couple of days ago, one of my favorite people, who you know very well, Colleen Sweeney, did a Facebook video, and she used the word perspective. And so one of the prime lessons that I got from Lessons in the Circle of Life was about perspective, the way we look at things. And let me share what happened once from off the stage. I had done the show for 6 months in a row, being there every single day. And keep in mind, we did 8 shows a week. But we also had what we called swings. And a swing was someone who could play a number of different roles. So one day they gave me the opportunity to go into the audience and watch the show while a swing took my place. Now, there was a very specific part in the show when I was on stage where Mufasa, who I played, he had died, but he then came back to life. And in this scene, the way that it rolled out on stage was you had a number of different dancers who had poles, and they each held a piece of the mask that would come together to form the face of Mufasa. Now, every night, and keep in mind, we did this show 8 times a week. Every performance, when the dancers would go and put this mask together, I was on the stage. I was there singing, and I had a veil just over my face, and I would look up at the mask to see how well they had put it together. These were heavy pieces. When we got backstage after they had done the mask, every single show, I made sure to tell the dancers, guys, that sucked. Just look them straight in the face. So they knew it was coming every show. Well, when I went into the audience to watch the show for the very first time, something changed. What it was is when that scene came around, where all the dancers came together and they put the pieces of the mask together, I stopped, I gasped, and a tear ran down my eyes. Now you might ask why. The reason is what had been looking so ugly to me while I was on stage and performing. When you sit in the audience, you actually see a bunch of strobe lights and special effects, and it completely transforms the way that mask looks. Well, after the show, first thing I did was I ran downstairs and I went to the dancers, and before I even opened my mouth, one of them said, "Watkiss, shut up. We already know the mask sucked." I said, "Wait, it was beautiful." And his response is, "What are you talking about? That is one of the worst masks we have ever done." And I said to him, "You don't realize what that mask looks like from the audience. It is unbelievable." That was the last time they ever heard any criticism about that mask from me. So as I think about perspective, I had always been looking at that mask from on stage. I saw how the pieces were supposed to be put together. I saw it as a set of steps that we took. But what I didn't see was the overall effect that it had on the audience who was watching. And I believe for every one of us, if we were to step off of our own stage and sit in our own audience, and rather than just looking at our day-to-day tasks or our jobs or our roles as parents or whatever it is that we hold as a title, if we would look at the impact we're having as opposed to just the steps that we take, we would be amazed by what people see. And it's all a matter of changing perspective. I ask you right now to start sitting in your audience and ask yourself, when I do my job, who does that affect? How does it help them? Because when you start seeing your role from a place of the impact you have, it changes your energy because you realize it's not just a set of steps. I also realized that my perspective was impacting or having an impact on people I performed with because they were rating or grading themselves in their performance because I had made it a habit. And so we have to be very aware as we look at everyone who we work with and who we come in contact with, if we just change our perspective, not on what they do, but on the effect that they have oh my gosh, it will change so much about the way that we feel about what we do and how we interact with other people. So that is lesson number one, it's to change your
That's
perspective.
beautiful. That's beautiful. And I can see the relevance to that right now during these difficult times to change that perspective. And I did see that post that Colleen made. It was very touching for me as well. We all come from different perspectives. And even as she was talking about how her family, you know, didn't look at this situation the same way as her, which made sense. She's a health professional and they're not. And so it's wonderful that you're there to share with us, to, you know, to gain that perspective, or maybe we have to change our perspective, whatever works best for you. I do know a lot of people have, they're having a lot more respect for the teachers now that they are having to teach their own kids. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, if I can't keep my kids under control, how am I supposed to expect those teachers, along with 20 other kids, to have control? So that's an excellent point. So there's one of our lessons in the circle of life. What else have you got for us?
I've got one that happened, again, both on stage and off stage. And we've heard, especially as performers, and if anyone watching is a speaker, the show must go on. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the lessons that I have is sometimes the show can't go on. The entire Lion King show was made up of incredible visuals. One of those visuals happens very early on in the show, where you see grass growing out of the stage, and then the grass starts to move up and eventually turns into men having grass boards on their head. It's a beautiful moment. Happened every single day, but one day as we were on the elevator, and I was one of the people who played the grass, we started doing our regular hums going up at the top. Hum, hum, the elevator stopped. See, this was a mechanical elevator. So it wasn't something very high tech. It was built on a stage. And the chain had broken somehow. And so they had to stop the show. And then they got all of us off of the elevator and they sent us back to the room as they tried to now fix what was broken on stage. Imagine this scenario. It's sold out. There are 2,000 people in that audience. Many of them have actually traveled to Toronto to watch the show from the United States. This was one of the earlier performances. New York was sold out quite a bit, so Toronto was the next best thing. So you had people who had traveled so far, they finally had their opportunity, they're sitting in the audience, and there is a malfunction. This is the only time it ever happened in our show. Well, what we had hoped would take minutes took hours. And we finally got the call, hey, we're going back up. But when we got back up to the stage, you could see the carpenters who were standing on the stage, because what they had done is to raise the elevator to a point where it was at least now in line with the rest of the stage. But they didn't have it done perfectly. And what they knew is that it was possible for one of the performers to go out there and trip on an uneven piece and injure themselves and ruin the show even more. And so we had a decision to make. Do we risk injuring one of the, or many of the cast members by continuing with the show? Or do we disappoint 2,000 people who've been waiting for this moment and who held it in highest regard? If we think about this from the perspective of our daily lives, you know, how many times have we gone out and performed, for lack of a better word, sick, done our job ill, not feeling our best, but figuring rather than disappoint everybody else, we're just going to go through when we're going to risk our own health. We canceled the show. It was disappointing for everybody involved, us included. It's not something we wanted to do. But we realized if we were to put our own selves at risk, that could go even further and cause more damage down the road. Whereas this was a one-time disappointment for the people who were there. I can't say enough. And we're seeing it, of course, right now with a shutdown to a large degree. But this is something that we should be doing for ourselves on a regular basis, getting enough rest. Because when we don't get enough rest, our body doesn't heal. Some of you may not know that I owned a studio as a personal trainer many years ago. And we think that working out is what actually builds muscle. No, it's the resting and the repair afterward that really makes a difference in our bodies. When we're not sleeping, when we're not eating, when we're not resting, when we are stressed out, all of those are reasons for us to stop the show for a moment, because we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. If we don't take care of us, we cannot take care of others. And so one of the best ways to maintain your health, give yourself some time out. Find an activity that you enjoy and that brings back that playfulness, because our best ideas don't happen when we're working. They happen when we are out. We're taking a shower, we're taking a walk, we're doing a run, we're doing something else. That's when the best ideas come to us. Sometimes the show cannot go on.
Good, 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 good. And that certainly ties in with everything that we've been talking about. And I see that in my business as well. You know, people think that they have to put in 80 hours of work every week in order to meet their goals. And yet sometimes by working less, recovering more, you can actually be more productive. And we see that now with the doctors and nurses who are getting sick and they can't go into the workplace. Whereas in the past, maybe they did. They were a little bit sick and they went into the workplace and they worked anyway. They can't now, and they're out for 14 days. And we're kind of seeing that in the workplace. What if we all just sit back, take this time as, like you said, this is a time to catch up on our sleep, to do the fitness that we need, not just for physical growth and building muscles, but also for rest and recovery, because I think taking a walk is the best way to relax. So, okay, there you go. Sometimes the show has got to be canceled. It's been canceled now for certainly the work that you do, John, and what I do. And so we're going to make the best of it, right?
Absolutely. And you know, if we want to be our best, we can't do it on limited rest and bad food. So you can do it for a while on adrenaline, but it's going to wear off.
Adrenaline isn't real energy. So excellent. Okay. And you've got one more point, I think, to make in the circle of life, right?
One more. And it comes from one of my favorite parts of the show. In fact, some people will just ask me to say the word Simba. Because in this part, this is where, if we go back to the mask, Mufasa comes back to speak to Simba. And he gives him a lesson, which is you are more than what you have become. So if I give you the scenario, Simba has been out living a life, that's his son, different than what he was meant to have inherited. He was supposed to be the king. He made mistakes. He thought that he had killed his own father, or that his father's death was his fault anyway. And so he ran away from that life, hence Hakuna Matata, which is another lesson, but I won't be sharing that one today. When he finally comes face to face with the ghost of his father, Mufasa says these words. He says, Simba, Simba, you have forgotten me. You have forgotten who you are, and so have forgotten me. Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life.
Wow! That was great.
Well, in that scene, we had dressers. They got us dressed behind the scenes. One of them said to me one day, how can you be more than you have become? I said, Woody, I think the translation he's saying is, you are better than you're behaving. There's more to you. One of my favorite speakers, the late Dr. Miles Monroe, he said, potential is all you can do but haven't done yet. All you can be but haven't become yet. How far you can go but haven't gone yet, and who you really are, but no one knows yet. many of us settle for far less than we're capable of doing. In other words, we get to a place of security. We even get to a place of fun. We get to a place that feels safe. And in that space, we sometimes settle, even though we realize there's so much more that we could be doing. So many more people that we could be affecting or helping out. So many more lives that we could be touching, but we're comfortable where we are, and so we stay there. I remember when I was running my fitness studio. In fact, when we met, I still had the fitness studio. And I remembered the words of Abraham Maslow. And it was, a musician must make music. An artist must write. A poet must paint. Ultimately, if a man is to be at himself, if a man is to be at peace, what he can be, he must be. What he can be, he must be. And for those of us who say, oh, I always wanted to, you know, I had dreams of being, what you can be, you must be. And I believe that until we reach that point where we are pursuing our dreams, there was always some discomfort. There was always something that troubles us and just creates that feeling that there should be more. I should be doing more, but I'm afraid, I'm nervous. I believe whenever we are on our path to doing what we're meant to do, it doesn't mean that things are going to be easy, but what it does mean is that even in the midst of the most trying circumstances, as long as we know that the end result we're searching for is worthwhile for us, those circumstances, we see them as temporary. And so as we are reevaluating the way we do things right now, because I believe everyone is, I would say take a look within and ask yourself that question. Have you been, or are you being all that you can be? Are you more than what you have become? What's your potential? What's your gift? Everybody has one. And I believe when we tap into our gifts, we are most satisfied, we are most at peace, and we are most helpful to everyone else around us.
I am more than I have become. I love that. I love that. Those are some great lessons for all of us. I'll tell you, I'll be thinking about this all day long. But I, like you, John, am looking at this as an opportunity to grow and reevaluate. We talked the other day about the new normal. We're entering a new normal. And I pulled out my puzzle the other day, John, also. You know, it's kind of like that puzzle. We open up that box and it's filled with lots of pieces and they're kind of messy. We don't know where they fit in. And maybe we're there, just opening up the puzzle of life. But each and every one of us can create a beautiful life throughout all of this. I just hope we can all become who we are supposed to become. So thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for John? I'm looking at the chat box. And hi, Alice and Natalie. So good to see you, Natalie Johnson. You know her, John. And does anybody have any questions for John right now? Maybe you want him to sing a little bit.
Okay, this is going to sound a little quirky, right? This song is not even a Circle of Life song. As much as I performed in The Lion King, my favorite musical is The Sound of Music.
Me too.
So,
yes. Go ahead.
I'll leave you with one of what I do. There's a verse that I like to quote to myself. Whatsoever things are good, honest, pure, of good report, is there's any virtue or any praise, think on those things. So one of my favorite songs is My Favorite Things. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens.
Bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens. There we go, right?
Wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses, blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, silver white winters that melt into spring. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, When I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
Beautiful.
Thank you for the assist,
I think
Dr.
that's a
Joe.
good reminder for all of us to think about those favorite things during this time. So many of us have burrowed ourselves in a little tunnel and hoping that, things will go away. You know what? We can all make it through these difficult times, and we can be stronger like Mufasa. We can be kind-hearted like Mufasa, right? We can teach
Absolutely.
what we know to other people, just like Mufasa did. He was an excellent role model to not just to Simba, but to everyone else in his tribe. Is that what they're called? Tribes?
Oh, pride,
They're
yes.
prides. There you go. All right. Well,
Pride.
thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to say goodbye. And with us next week, we have Alice Henneman, who is going to be talking about creative quarantine cooking. When you look in your cabinet, you say, I don't know what to make out of this. Alice Henneman has been an extension agency for her whole career. She has been posting on social media for way longer than I have. She has got the solutions for you. We also have Neely talking with us next week as well about self-soothing during these difficult times. And then Tiffany Kellogg is going to talk with us about how to not go down that rabbit hole, how to stop procrastinating and get the things done that we need to do, the things that we want to do during these difficult times. So until next time, bye-bye.
Thanks, Dr. Joe.
Bye.